Okay, good evening. I hope you can all see. Let me put it full screen. Okay. Gila, let me know if everything is okay and you can see.
Yep.
Thank you for the introduction. I think you covered most of my lectures already. So in this series, we are going to follow the development of the Ketubah as an artifact, as a Jewish object, and of course the art of the Ketubah. This will be the main focus. And I'll do it in chronological way. Today we'll start with the earliest evidence that we have about this document and how it developed. In the first 1,000 years, no illustrations, but I'll talk about that in a minute. And next week we'll see Italy of the Baroque period, which is really the country where this art form reached the height of its artistic development. And the last one will deal with Islamic community. I selected Iran to show you how this object developed in one community under Islam and what we can learn about Jewish life in Iran from the Ketubot. Okay, so today we, as I said, the beginning was the beginning, and I want just to put you, let's say, in the picture, as we say, and begin with two later Ketubot. Not from antiquity, as I said, not ancient ketubot were not illustrated, and we'll talk about that, but just so that you'll see how important this object was, and maybe still is, for the Jews of the past, because when you look at these two examples, one from Venice on the left and one from the island of Corfu, on Venice we'll speak more next week, you can see how much, let's say, was invested into making these two documents. They are large on parchment, the size of about 70-80 centimeters high, from the skin of one animal that was slaughtered to make them, and a lot of text, a lot of illustrations, very tiny ones, and it's hard to see them even on the slides. Now you have to enlarge and to see close up. Each one is sort of, I would call it, encyclopedia of Jewish symbols and ideas. So really a lot was put into these documents in the past, and the planning of the text and the illustrations. And what is even more important is that we have many ketubot that survived, relatively many, and they tell us about the life of individuals from the past, people about whom we don't know anything else besides their marriage contract that survived, names that otherwise you won't come through. We have names of rabbis, we have the sections of the dowry that tells us a lot about the daily life and the jewelry that was common and what was the practice, what kind of dowry you bring, many marriage let's see issues that come to the fore in the text, the conditions that you see on the left in the Venetian Ketubah tell you a lot about the contacts between the two families and the halacha about marriage that was in Venice at the time, and a lot of information. And also every Ketubah has the date, has the place, so we know exactly where is it from. So it's really like something sort of a treasure for the scholar, because here now we can reveal, let's say, a Ketubah from a village in Yemen that otherwise we don't know anything about it, but because we have the contract, we know that there was a Jewish community there once, and so on and so forth. So, as I would say, every Ketubah is a sort of like a volume of information for us today when you study all the components that make it so important Jewish object. And of course the art, and you can see just the two examples that I showed you here, selected here. Let's just take the one from Corfu. The upper section is not what you'd usually expect today when you speak about marriage. The upper section of this contract, and I selected that on purpose, shows you the giving of the law on Mount Sinai. As here is the upper section here. We see Mount Sinai, we see Moses, the Ten Commandments, and the Israelites standing on the two sides of the mountain. Below there are other things that relate to the marriage, like the family emblems and so on. We'll talk more about this next week. But why the giving of the law on Mount Sinai? What has to do with the wedding that is conducted in the island of Corfu of an unknown couple? The reason is very simple, and this shows us really the meaning behind the artwork of this ketubot, that the sin that is shown, the giving of the law on Mount Sinai, is really what is understood in Judaism as the marriage between God and Israel. Here we have the moment of the marriage. It took place on Mount Sinai on the 5th of Sivan in the year so and so after the creation. And here is God taking into his wife, you can say, taking to his wife. He is the bridegroom, the wife is Israel, and Moses is the best man, and he's giving him the ketubah to deliver. The ketubah is the 10 Commandments. So that's why the sin is here. On these 10 Commandments, on these tablets, are written the regulations or the instructions of how marriage should be conducted, or how the two should live together. If you fulfill these commandments, you'll get this and that, and this is, as we'll see in a second, also some of the wording of the ketubah. So here we see, I don't know how many people of today would think to put this episode at the top of their marriage contract because of this meaning that was attached to it by Corfu Jews. At the same time, we'll find episodes that tell us, that show us famous marriages from the past, like here, for example, in this ketubah from the city of Turin in Italy. We have the episode of Rebecca meeting Isaac. Rebecca is riding on the camel, and Isaac is going out and sees her for the first time, because this story in the book of Genesis implies that the two got married soon after that, and so here we have that on the top of this Torino contract. At the same time, we'll have episodes that show us the marriage of the time also. Here is another Italian ketubah that shows from Padua, near Venice, and it shows a Baroque Jewish couple in their home, in their living room, and the bedroom is here. We can even see the bedroom, we can see the furniture, we can see he's leading her into the house, into the room for the first night, and so on. So there is a lot of information, whether symbolic or biblical or of actual marriages, that are shown in these contracts. And in this way, as I said at the beginning, they open for us really something. How can we imagine how was a Jewish house in Padua in the 18th century without such a picture? I mean, even if you have hundreds of words, and you don't have, because not many people would write about this at that time, here you have in one picture giving you all the information. Okay, so having said all that, of course, if it was from the time of the Bible and we would have illustrated ketubot, imagine we would have the ketubah of, let's say, the marriage between Abraham and Sarah, for example. Of course, it's anachronistic, but let's put it in this way. We would have been very lucky, or the ketubah of Maimonides, or I don't know, these kind of figures. We don't have, of course, of these names that I'm mentioning. And actually, in the Bible, there's no mention whatsoever of a ketubah or of a marriage contract. What we do have is a bill of divorce. This is mentioned in the Bible, in the book of Deuteronomy, that if the husband doesn't like his wife, he can write her a certificate of divorce, Sefer Kritut in Hebrew, put it in her hand, and sends her out of his house. And until today, we use this certificate of divorce that we call get. Here is a typical get on the other side, on the right, that shows you that this is something that's going back to biblical times, that we have something like that. And the rabbis of old would say, of course, if there was a book of divorce, there was a book of marriage. For them it's certain, although nowhere it's mentioned in the Bible. Actually, the first time that we hear of a marriage contract in Jewish life comes from an apocryphal book, in a book that is not included in the Bible. It is included in the Christian Bible, in the Vulgate of the Old Testament, not of the New Testament. Yes, the Old Testament, the Greek and Latin translations of the Bible have the book of Tobit. Is a Jewish story that did not make it to the Hebrew Bible, but it's part of the Christian one. And it's since it was included in the Old Testament, of the Christian Old Testament, there are many works of art about it. I'm showing you Rembrandt, for example, my most beloved artist, showing a scene from the book of Tobit. Here's blind Tovia and his wife and the kid, and we won't go now to the details, but anyway, it's a story that is told in the book of Tobit. So this book of Tobit, that was composed around the 3rd or 4th century before the Common Era, has the story of a wedding. The hero of the book is getting married, and we have the story of how this was conducted, and there are few issues here that are of great interest to us. We have also in the Bible stories of marriages, and one of them we'll deal with in a second, but they don't mention these items that we see here for the first time. So the parents are making this contract, and they do it according to the law of Moses. Yes, I mean, as we say today, the husband betroths his wife according to the law of Moses and Israel. And then it says, and taking the right hand of his daughter, he gave it into the right hand of Tobias. This is the hero of the book. Taking the right hand of the woman and the right hand of the man, of the bridegroom, means they are getting married. I want to show you how it looks at that time. For example, in Roman art, we don't have any Jewish picture of that, but we have from Roman art. Here is a sarcophagus of the wedding that depicts an image of the wedding, and we see the bridegroom, we see the bride, and is giving her his right hand. It's called in Latin dextrarum junctio, union of the right, meaning that's how they got married, joining the right hands of the two. And you see that between them, here are the hands, let me show a detail, and he's holding the contract. Okay, he's holding the contract. Now, there were contracts of marriage in many cultures in antiquity. Jews did not invent this. The Babylonians had one, the Egyptians, the Greek, the Romans. Not for every wedding, but wedding contract was something that is part of life, especially in the Near East. That was really, since the time of Hammurabi and on, you cannot imagine a wedding in the Near East without the contract. So that's something that we see and we know. So let's go back to the text from Tuvia, and then he's saying to them, after he put the right hands together, the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, be with you, and may he join you together and fulfill a blessing to you. And he took a paper, they made a writing of the marriage. Okay, and afterwards they made Mary, blessing God, and Raguel called Anna and his wife, and so on and so on. So they took a writing of marriage. We don't have the book of Tobit in Hebrew. We don't know what the Hebrew would say here. The book did not survive in Hebrew because it was not part of the Hebrew Bible, was not included and forgotten by the Jews. But in the Greek version, the oldest one that we have, this is the term that appears. And I don't know, many of you read Greek, it's not so important, but anyway, it's the term that is used, that I put here in red, is a writing of marriage, is a book that documents the marriage, more or less, okay? So this is the first time that we hear about not really a ketubah, but that there was among the Jews of, let's say, the first centuries before the Common Era, a book of marriage. And actually here I want to show you, since the book of Tobit, as I mentioned, was known to Christians very well, there are some artists who illustrated this episode. So here we see, this is Jan Steen, a Dutch artist. So here we see the couple, okay, the bridegroom, the bride, Tobias and Sarah, and these are the parents here, and this is the scribe, and is writing the document. Yes, I want to show you, this is a 17th century painting, but it shows the writing of a marriage contract before we have a ketubah. The first evidence, material evidence, that we have of a Jewish marriage contract, not ketubah yet, but that there was a contract drawn at the marriage, not by, let's say, thinking might have been in the Bible, not mentioned in the book, but that something survived, is from this place, from Aswan, from Elfantini. It's called this island, had a Jewish colony in the centuries before the Common Era, and the archives of this colony written on papyri were discovered. They are today in the Brooklyn Museum, not the Jewish Museum, the Brooklyn Museum. They were excavated and taken to the US already in the early 20th century. And some of them are marriage contracts. Here I'm showing you a papyrus marriage contract of a Jewish couple written in Aramaic, and the bridegroom is Anania, like Hanania, and she is Tamut, that's her name. And here we have the date, and this is one of the earliest marriage contracts that we have. It's like the ancestor, you can say, of the ketubah, because here what we see in this contract is really the exchange of property between the two families, especially the list of the dowry and the list of the bride price, the mohar. The bridegroom has to buy the bride, she brings the dowry, and these are basically the amounts that are listed. When we come to the time of the Mishnah and the Talmud, we have more and more evidence. It seems that this is taking hold in Eretz Israel of antiquity. Some of the documents discovered in the Judean desert, like with the Dead Sea Scrolls, are marriage contracts written on papyri still. Parchment was not known yet, and they are again like the precursors of the ketubah, because they have more or less the same type of wording that will be on the ketubah. Here is one that was discovered from the time of Bar Kokhba, the 2nd century to the Common Era, of this woman Bapta. Bapta was spent a lot of time in rabbinical courts of her time, and she kept every document, and her documents were found. They are today in the Shrine of the Book in the Israel Museum, and you can see she married twice, and this is one of the marriages. Here is her marriage contract that Yigael Yadin, who discovered it, the author of this book, remember, if you remember, those of you remember him, called it the ketubah of Babata. I mean, he said it's by all means already a ketubah. So we're speaking about 2nd century to time of the Mishnah. By the time we get to the Talmud, 4th, 5th century, the ketubah is established document in Jewish tradition. There are many discussions about it in the Talmud, especially in these two tractates, in tractate Ketubot and Kiddushin, that deal with marriage law, and we hear all what should be written in the ketubah, it says. And really, the main purpose of this document is to assure a woman that at the time when she gets married, if her husband will die during her lifetime, when she's still alive, or will divorce her, she won't stay alone without money, without possibility. Because she is not, let's say, on her behalf, yes? So in this document, what is developing in the Talmudic period is that Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel is considered the one who, let's say, gave the legitimation to this document and maybe worded it even in antiquity. What it says, and if you read the ketubah carefully, it's the bridegroom is speaking. Yes, the ketubah is really written in first person, and the bridegroom is the one who is speaking. I, with the help of heaven, will work for you and cherish you and provide for you and have sexual intercourse with you and so on. And this is like he's saying to the witnesses what he's going to do when he's taking this woman into his wife. Because, again, if I go to what I said before, he can divorce her at will. So this, the takana of the ketubah, according to the Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel and the other rabbis of Talmudic times, was to make divorce difficult. He has to think twice if he wants to divorce her or not, because she will stay without someone to provide for her. So this document is now in addition to the laws of the Torah, you can say, because in here it says what should be done if he divorces her. As long as they live together and he provides for her and everything is okay, she doesn't need this document. So this, the takana of the ketubah, is to make divorce difficult. This is one of the considerations of the rabbis of the time. And actually, in the ketubot in the Talmudic period, there were many other obligations that were listed in the ketubah, but today they are not part of our contracts. For example, if she falls in captivity, he has to ransom her. If she falls ill, he has to provide for doctors. If she dies in his lifetime, he has to hire mourners to go in the funeral after her, during the funeral, to follow her, to the cemetery, and so on and so forth. I mean, not all these conditions are they finally decided not to include them because it was self-understood that they should be, and they left the most important ones. The most important ones are now the money that he should give if he divorces her or if he dies in her lifetime. According every ketubah that you have at home, if you read it, the translation in English or in Hebrew, the rabbinical court is allowed even to sell the shirt that he's wearing in order to provide for her what he's taking the obligation at the time of the wedding. Okay, so now we come to the period. If you have other questions on the text, you can ask me later, because it's very complex, and then you can understand that there were many discussions about it already in the Talmudic period until we got to the more or less final wording. We get now to the Middle Ages, because I want to show you now the beginning of the art of the ketubah. And the beginning was not in antiquity. I mean, we don't know that any ketubah from the Talmudic period, although we have some that survived, not only from Eretz Israel, but already also from the diaspora. But none is illustrated. The first that are illustrated, or some decorated, I would say, not illustrated, are from the Cairo Geniza. I mean, they are medieval. Okay, so here is those of you who are not familiar with this synagogue in Cairo, in Fostat, Old Cairo, synagogue of Ben Ezra. This is the old section of Cairo, Fostat. This is the interior of the synagogue from an old picture. This synagogue is been in Jewish hands and used since the 10th century. So it's a synagogue that, although the building today is restoration of the 19th century, but the site of the building and the basic structure is since the Middle Ages. Here is the interior of this synagogue, and so we are now in this is the main prayer room, this is the Torah Ark, Aron HaKodesh here, and this is the women gallery. See, the women gallery is on two sides. The women gallery that is on the left, that's where I'm pointing, here is the room of the Geniza. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, here is the left gallery. You see the ladder here. This is the place that leads to the storage of the Geniza. Here is my friend, Professor Rina Talgam of the Hebrew University, when we were there, and she is sitting here in the room where the Geniza is. And here is this reconstruction of how it was. Every document written in Hebrew letters, even if it's not in Hebrew, let's say it is in Judeo-Arabic or Yiddish, was not thrown away but put in this room for centuries, from the 10th century and on. and so they survived because the climate of Egypt is very good, and they are not buried in the ground like the Ashkenazim do for Geniza, and so the documents survived, or at least as fragments, they survived for all this long period, and no one touched this room until the late 19th century. So here is how, when the documents were found, this is how they were found, because, if you are paper or parchment that is just no one touching it, this is what happens to it. And today we consider this, the most sacred trash that we have of Judaism because of this, of what it contains. So just before we go to the ketubot, I just want to show you, for example, the oldest book for learning Hebrew for children, for school children, was found in Geniza. And you see, those of you who maybe went to a traditional day school, Kamatz Aleph A. This is how you learn to pronounce each letter. This is how the kids learned it. And you notice the letters are big and colored. And so you have all the vowels possible. And then after Aleph you go to Bet. And then Bet with the Gesh, Bet without the Gesh, Gimel, and so on. What you see on the left is the earliest that we have, a song with musical notes. These are medieval musical notes. We know how this piyut was recited because these are the notes that I'm showing you here. So thanks to the Geniza, we have many important items that otherwise would not have been known to us, and how this was in daily life. So among these were found about some 40, maybe 45 fragments of ketubot. Most of them are in this shape. You see, we have just small piece of parchment. We know it's a ketubah because even the few words that are extant tell us, because there is a certain way of writing the ketubah. Sometimes it's the text of the ketubah. Sometimes it's the upper section with the song that I'll show you in a second. Some of them are, you have fragments that have more information on them, and you can see that there are some illustrations. Okay, there is a flower, there are colored letters here. These are the earliest illustrated ketubot that we have. And you see, some more of these fragments. They have wedding poems, they have some text of the ketubah, and so on. I just want to give you one example to show you one fragment, what kind of verses, because all this, what I'm showing you now, will become standard among the Jews of Islam and the Sephardim in Europe. What kind of illustrations to use, what kind of verses to write in the ketubah. So for example, here we have 2 verses. This is the whole fragment that we have. It's in Cambridge today. So it's only, you see, one tiny part of this large page of the ketubah that was in the past. Here we have 2 words, and here you have 2 words. Out of, this is the frame of the ketubah. And so here, the 2 words that are above, you can immediately identify. Firstly, because, you have concordance and it's not difficult, but also because they would appear, as I said, in many ketubot of later periods. Because this is how this tradition begins here. So here, this verse that appears here from Isaiah, it's about the jewelry of the bride. And here, so here we have the beginning of this verse, Kiv al Bachur Betula, and so on. You can read it in the English here. And then after that follows the description of the jewelry, which was part of the inscription here that is gone. The lower verse has 2 words, Haskenim Edim, the elders are witnesses, and this comes from the book of Ruth. The book of Ruth, chapter 4, has a description of the wedding of Ruth and Boaz at the city gate, which is very important. The city gate will become to play a major part of the decoration of the ketubah. And so here we have this verse that the elders were at the city gate, and they say, we are witnesses. You need for every wedding witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, who together build the house of Israel. Here we have a few very interesting ideas. The 2 words that I marked, Haskenim Edim, you see, Haskenim Edim, E10, you have the beginning of E10 here. What is important here, is that it's telling us about the upper verse about the jewelry of the wedding, and here about the place of the wedding at the city gate, and also the blessing of the elders of the city of Ruth and Boaz are telling them, this is the blessing, may you build the house of Israel. How you build the house of Israel? I mean, for an artist now, an artist of the time, had to think about it, how to illustrate that. So we have one ketubah from the Cairo Geniza that has the entire text and the wedding poem at the top. Okay, you see the entire text is very long, very detailed, and I'll speak about that in a second. And here is the wedding poem that is at top. This ketubah is from Fostat. Yes, it says here in Fostat, which is situated on the river Nile. Dal Nilus Ne'ara Mutva. And it's very important to mention the name of the river. This is the first time that we see it in Ketubot, and this will become standard among the Sfaradim and the Jews of Islam. It's not only because borders change all the time, it can be Ottoman Empire, it can be Turkey, and so on. And the river does not change, the river continues to flow. But also because the river is a symbol of fertility, a symbol of flow. It reminds of the rivers of paradise, and so on. So they would indicate in every ketubah the name of the river, because you look to get married for children, yes, and this is the water that is flowing is a good symbol for that. Anyway, so look at the wedding poem here. It's in Hebrew, of course. It's in rhyming verses. בשעה מעולה ועונה מעוללה ושמחה וצהלה. I mean, you have all this telling you the joy of the wedding, really. And there are flowers above these words, and they're written in beautiful square letters. And so every time that there is one expression, בשעה מעולה, there is a space. And so there are two more words, and then there is a space. And below that space, there is another expression. It's like purpose. You see, here there is one expression, here is empty. Here is below the empty space, there is a word. This is done on purpose. And actually the last words of this wedding poem, which by the way is anonymous, we don't know who composed it, it says, may the bridegroom and bride be happy and rejoice. May they flourish, may they shine, and may they build and be successful. Yivnu v'yatzlichu, while they build. What they build? They build the house of Israel. So how this song, how the way of writing this song shows you the building the house of Israel. Because if you know, those of you who read from the Torah in the synagogue, you know that for poetry that is very positive, that is very encouraging, you write it in a system that is called by Chazal Ariach al gabe levena or levena al gabe ariach, meaning you are making like a wall of bricks, full brick and half brick. This is to show that this is something very solid, very steadfast, something you can trust. This is like building a house or a wall that is meaningful to you, that is has some significance, and it's very, part of Hebrew language and the Hebrew literature to connect words with architecture. For example, we call a page in the book Amud. Amud means column. We call the head of the chapter capital, koteret, like in English also. We call the title page of the book Amud Ashar, the page of the gate. Like the gate, you enter to learn Torah, or you read the Holy Book, you enter into another world. So there are many words in Hebrew that are connected with architecture to describe the book and the writing. And here is one of them. This is where, so the maker of this contract really wants to show us. Here is, I cannot illustrate the house, I can do it through song. Everyone would recognize this immediately, that this is like Shirat Hayam, the song of the sea. Only the song of the sea you write in this way. Yes, like you see here. Yeah. Okay. Now, why to illustrate the ketubah at all? Why to show this is, let's say, it's actually only a halachic document. So why to show this, let's say, additional ideas about its, let's say, beauty and so on? One thing that happens during the time of the Cairo Geniza, meaning the early Middle Ages in Eretz Israel and Egypt, is that they started to read aloud the ketubah in the wedding, like we do today. This is when it starts for the first time. You read the text in front of everybody. You read in front of everybody, and part of the reading, which this we don't have today, but was very common in the past and among Jews of Islam until recently, it includes also all the list of the dowry. Yes, I mean, you see that on many of the weddings of the Cairo Geniza and of later times, that every item that she brought, the bride, is listed and its value. And usually the list is in Judeo-Arabic because these items of jewelry and items of clothing did not have Hebrew terms to them. So it's listed and everyone can hear it. So you want to show, that your daughter is in good hands and you did your utmost to provide for her wedding, and so that everyone will be impressed. And so you read it aloud while everyone can see the ketubah. And the document should be fitting for that. It cannot be just a dull document, that small piece of paper. It has to be appropriate for this occasion where you show your wealth. I want just to show you how the dowry was composed. This is not from the Middle Ages, unfortunately, but it's from the Jews of Afghanistan or in more recent times. And you can see, every item was displayed, and then there was this sanduk, as it was called, this chest on which you put everything. It's taken from the house of the bride to the house of the bridegroom, and it's everyone can see it. Yes, not only that, there were appraisers that would come to the house of the woman before the wedding, before the chuppah. This is from Morocco, what I'm showing you. It's by an Israeli artist who was born in Marrakesh, and she illustrates here what she remembers. And this is the appraiser, the chacham. Every item is put here on display. Every item she brings, part of her dowry, including items of brass. Here is the sanduk, and he is writing in the ketubah the value of each item. And then they will read it in the wedding. So this, I think, the reason why they started to illustrate ketubot in this period. One thing that is another feature that is part of the illustrations and is of great interest is micrography. Something that developed in medieval Egypt is to write Hebrew text in beautiful shapes. Not only for the ketubah. This is not the ketubah. This is the Bible. I just want to show you the name of the scribe, the colophon, how it's written beautiful into two triangles overimposed on each other, two squares overimposed on each other, and a circle. It's like the harmony on the universe. And in the background is gold leaf. Let me show you detail, okay? This is not called Magen David, by the way, yet. This name Magen David was not associated with this design in this period. Anyway, but you can see how this is beautiful done, and you see the micrography, how it forms all this. It's also done in the marriage contracts, in some of them that survived. Here, for example, we have these fragments, and with the same wedding song that we saw before. It's in the Bodleian library. I'll show you detail. There are two arches that intersect. This is now the house in Israel, to build a house. This is the gate where the elders are seated to witness the wedding. Two arches, architectural idea, and the arches are composed of micrography. You see the micrography here? All these are written with tiny Hebrew letters, and the song is written in gold leaf. Okay, I'll skip that. Okay. So now this tradition of writing this beautiful kind of songs continued among the Jews of Islam and some communities preserved it till the 20th century, like the Jews of Yemen. The same wedding song. This is a Sanaanic bride, a bride from the city of Sana, from the capital, Jewish bride, I mean. This is the Jewish quarter of Sana in the past. And here are the ketubot from Sana. And it's the same wedding song that is written in the same manner of Ariach al gabe Levena or Levena al gabe Ariach, like a brick wall. Because they still use this term, V'ivnu ve'atzlichu. May they build and be successful, the bride and the bridegroom. May they build a house in Israel. So the Yemenite Jews continue this to this day. Yes, until immigration to Israel. There are many other interesting things to say about Yemen ketubot, but if you'll ask at the end, if you're interested, I can tell you more. Even the way they count the years is not the way that you are accustomed to, and their own system. Okay, now we move to Europe, and we'll spend the rest of this lecture in Europe, and also next week. This tradition arrives from the Middle East, and Egypt and Eretz Israel and maybe Babylonia as well, to European Jewry. And so the European Jews they receive many of their traditions from Babylonia. We know how the Babylonian Talmud becomes very popular in the yeshivot in Europe in the Middle Ages, whether in Ashkenaz or Sepharad or Italy, doesn't matter. So we know the traditions were going from the east to the west, because actually the strength of medieval Judaism was in the Islamic lands, not in Europe. I mean, in, let's say, around the year 1000, when these documents from the Cairo Geniza were done, almost 90% of world Jewry lived under Islam, which is amazing from what we happened later. But anyway, so the traditions arrived to Europe, and they are known by both the Sephardim, meaning the Jews of the Iberian Peninsula, and the Ashkenazim, meaning Jews of France and Germany in particular, in the Middle Ages. And each one takes it into a different direction. I want first to show you the Ashkenazim, because we have only one decorated ketubah for medieval Ashkenaz. And this is it. It's from a city that is today in Austria, a city that is called Krems, and it was discovered, really this is the city, how it looks today. It was discovered by sheer accident in the late 19th century by no other than those of you who know a little bit the history of Jerusalem here, the father of Tamar, the wife of Teddy Kollek. He was the librarian in the Vienna National Library of the Hebrew manuscripts, and he discovered these four fragments. There were four fragments that were served as the binding of two Christian books. They are parchment, written only on one side, the side that we see, and while lifting these Christian Gospels, he saw that there are Hebrew letters on the other side, and they removed them and found this ketubah. Now it's see four sections, and it's not complete because these were cut for each, the front cover, the back cover, so we are missing sections here. Okay, so it's illustrated, and not only it's illustrated with human figures, which is amazing, because in the lands of Islam it was not allowed to have human figures. The Muslims did not do it, the Jews did not do it, but in Europe it's a different situation. So let's see the upper section of this contract that shows us the bridegroom and the bride, and is about to put the ring on her finger. She extends her hand, and here you have the text on Bashishi B'Shabbat, on Friday, on the fifth day of we're missing the month. We have the date, the year it survived, 5152, which is 1392. Leminyan Shanu Monim, the name of the city just survived partially. The bridegroom is Shalom Bar Menachem. Ashkenazim don't write last name because there was no last name at the time. They don't write after the name of the city the name of the river. This is something that only the Sfaradim and Jews of Islam did. So only they write the name of the city. and her name did not survive here, but it survived at the end of the ketubah, at the bottom, and her name is Tzemach, which is very modern name, which is interesting. Tzemach bat Aaron. Okay, so let's look at the details. Okay, first of all, so here we have a wedding episode. The first wedding episode on a ketubah ever that we have is human figures. This is the moment where he's going to put the ring on her finger. I just want to remind you that only he puts the ring on her finger. Not they don't exchange rings like the Christians, because the ring that he is putting on her finger is kesef kiddushin. This is according to the halacha, the money with which the bridegroom buys the bride. I mean, allegorical money that he buys the bride. And this is the tabat, the ring is the shve prota, what's called in the halacha, meaning it's worth a certain amount of money, so that's what he does. So he's about to put the ring and telling her, you are betrothed to me with this ring, according to the law of Moses, and so on. Okay, so this the wedding episode, and we have wedding episodes in Ashkenaz at that time. For example, here is one machzor, the Worms machzor that is in the National Library here in Jerusalem, done in medieval Worms. And here you have the wedding episode, and here is the bridegroom, here is the bride, and they are covered by a talit. This is the chuppah, and this is the rabbi who is about to bless over the wine. By the way, this episode appears in a machzor for a piyut for the Shabbat before Passover, that is called Shabbat HaGadol, and actually it speaks, the piyut, Iti mi Levanon Kala, it says, God says to Israel, what I told you at the beginning, this is the marriage between God and Israel, because in this Shabbat you read the Song of Songs, which is the love poetry between God and Israel. So here, this is the bridegroom who looks like a medieval German Jew with the Judenhood, but he is God, represents God, and this is the bride. So this is the scene that we have on our ketubah as well. And we have in Haggadot also marriage episodes. I'll just show you one. This is the Nuremberg Haggadah, again from medieval Germany. And it shows the life of Moses, although even episodes that are not mentioned at all, not only in the Haggadah, but not even in the Bible. So the bottom episode here is the marriage, the wedding ceremony between Moses and Zipporah, his wife. So, but the artist depicted it as a wedding ceremony of medieval Ashkenaz. So here is the same episode. The bridegroom is about to put a ring on her finger, and he's telling her, "El lacha erusin uvetabat mekachin." I betroth you with this ring. This is her mother. This is the rabbi with the cup of wine. This is the klezmer playing for the wedding, and this is the chuppah. The chuppah at this time was only a piece of cloth that covered the heads of the two of them in Ashkenaz. And notice she has a crown. You see the crown with a yellow piece of like gem, like a piece of jewelry here. Okay, let's go back to our ketubah. You see the bride, she's extending her hand, and she has a crown on her head. Okay, we see this is the symbol of the virgin in Middle Ages. Virgin before getting married, before she stops to be virgin, yes? So Virgo, for example, in the zodiac cycles, in Ashkenaz, was shown with a crown always. This Mazal Betula, of the cycle of the zodiac in this Machzor, and this is the sign for the month of Elul, which is Virgo, the zodiac sign, and she has a crown. Also in the Christian weddings of the time of Western Europe, every wedding scene that you look at, many of them at least, there are two wedding episodes, non-Jewish of course. I'll show you details. The bride has a crown, the bridegroom doesn't. It's not so easy what I'm telling you, because if you know the halacha, the crowns were forbidden since the destruction of the temple. And so in Ashkenaz they decide to redo it for reasons that are too long to explain here. But anyway, but this is what we see in the Ketubah, that she is wearing the crown. I just don't show it again. See the bride here is with the crown. Okay, let's look at him. He's holding the ring. Okay, this is Shalom, whose name is like mine, Shalom ben Menachem, and he's holding the ring. He has the Judenhut again. He's, by the way, Gothic style, very elongated figure, what we call the international Gothic style in the history of art, and he's holding the ring. We notice that the ring is yellow, made of gold, and there is something at top of it. Okay, here you see in other episodes also holding the ring in this way. But I want to show that it has something on top, yes? According to the halacha, the ring must be flat, only gold, and not with decorations, because it will change the value, and you cannot know the real value of the ring if it's decorated, because if it's only gold, you can weigh the gold and see what's the price for gold at the time, and that's it. But if there is a jewelry on it or something, it changes the value, so it's not considered okay, according to the rabbis. But still, we see here evidence that the rings, wedding rings, were not only a circlet of gold. It was more than that. And so, this was just a conjecture until in the 1990s was discovered the treasury of Erfurt, this small town in Germany, where there was a Jewish quarter, where the Jews at the time of the Black Plague, the Black Death, in 1348, hid their treasures in the basement. It was discovered in 1990s when they were doing some rebuilding in that quarter, and went down and found all these items hidden. It's still today in Erfurt. A family, Jewish family, that feared for its life, hid everything there, and it was there until from 1348 until today. So one of the items that discovered there is a wedding ring, medieval Ashkenazi wedding ring. And indeed we see that there is a circle of gold, but there is a house at top. Looks like Gothic cathedral. Is this the style of the time? So what is this house? Maybe it's the new house to build for the bride and bridegroom, as we said before. Maybe it's the Temple of Jerusalem. Maybe it's Messianic Jerusalem. Who knows? And the bottom there are the hands of the bride and bridegroom, like we said also before, holding each other. Yes, as a symbol of marriage. Yes, you can compare now the two. And by the way, there is another treasure that was discovered much earlier, already in the late 19th century, in Colmar, in Alsace of today, not far from South Germany, in Colmar. And here the ring also has sort of a structure at top, and it's polygonal, and on each side there is one Hebrew letter, and they read Mazal Tov, 6 letters. Mazal Tov. This is what the Ashkenazim say at the wedding. Maybe I'll show you one more issue, and see Sfarad we want to be able to do today. You saw the wedding, how it was in medieval Ashkenaz. I think because my lecture is not only on the Ketubah, I want just to give you some information also on how the Jewish wedding developed. What you saw before, that they are just, where is it? They are just a piece of textile above them, is not how we do it today. So what happened in the Middle Ages, in the around 14th century, is that they changed the place of the wedding. Instead of doing it at home, they started to do it in the court of the synagogue. So they were leading the bride and the bridegroom to the synagogue, the Ashkenazim. And so they wanted now to imitate, that's according to some scholars, to imitate how Christians do it, to march with holy items. Yes, they have this baldacchino with which they march with the reliquaries, or the king is under baldacchino. Because what the Ashkenazim started to do is to march from the house of the bride to the synagogue, And so they lead the bride and the bridegroom under something that they are working with, to come to the courtyard of the synagogue here and to have the chuppah here. So that's why they invented a portable chuppah, which we have until today. In every book of custom, you'll see since then and on, this is now Frankfurt, 17th century, a portable chuppah, yes? And the bridegroom and bride are beneath it. And this will be shown on other items and so on. So we can conclude with Ashkenaz, and the story of Sepharad is different. What happened in Ashkenaz is that the Ketubah was eventually standardized, and the text became to be one and simple, and every Ketubah looks more or less the same text. You can either write it by hand or just fill the names, and so they stopped illustrating them. They stopped illustrating them in Ashkenaz, and they became a negligible almost object because everyone knew the text, and the text is the same. The dowry is standardized. They don't say the real dowry. They just say 50 זיקוקים של כסף צרוף or something standard. And so the Ketubah lost its importance after the Middle Ages among the Ashkenazim. And we don't have illustrated Ketubot from Hungary or Poland or Russia or Romania until almost the late 19th century or 20th century. So for centuries, this art died in Ashkenaz, while in Sfarad and the Jews of Islam and the Italian Jews, it flourished. But this will be the topic of next week, I think. So I'll stop here, and I hope I didn't give you too much information. It was okay, and you could follow. I'll stop share, and if you have questions, I'll be happy to reply.
Thank you so much. We don't have time for that many questions, but
Okay.
in the Sephardic world, because that was more illustrated, was the illustrations a sign of social status?
Say it again. Was the illustration?
Was
I didn't hear the
having
last part.
illustrated ketubah a sign of social status that only?
Sure, yeah. Okay, we'll speak more about that. But in Ashkenaz, it wasn't a question of status, because they stopped illustrating them, whether you are poor or rich. I mean, this is, by the way, also the reason why they stopped writing the dowry, because they didn't want to show in the wedding one is richer, one is wealthier than the other. Among the Sfaradim, if you were rich, you want to show it to everyone. This is another story altogether. So we know the affluent families, and I'll speak about that next week. For example, in Italy, there was competition on how much you spend on the ketubah. The rabbi said to put a limit, because people were doing it more and more extravagant. Among the Sfaradim, it was something of show-off, while among the Ashkenazim, it stopped. So you can immediately see the relationships between the decorations and the dowry. It's very clear. So the question is correct.
And are we able to know which hand they put the ring on from the pictures?
Oh wow, it's a good question. It's really not doesn't matter. Actually, I don't think there is maybe there are customs about it, but there is not halacha, I think, solid about this, because actually the ring, as I said, is just shve pruta. You can buy with a coin, you can buy with a cup of wine, you can buy with whatever, because the ring, and this is also something that not many people know, is became common in Roman society to put the ring on the finger. And so when the time, let's say in the late Middle Ages, the Jews wanted to have something symbolic, they borrowed this idea to use the ring. The ring is not mentioned anywhere in the Talmud, or of course not in the Bible, as something with which is part of the wedding, of the Jewish wedding. Like the breaking of the glass, and there are many other customs that we do at the wedding, when they are mostly customs and that have become traditional, but they are not really part of the halacha. So the ring is not what the rabbis were concerned. I said much more than on which hand is whether the ring is decorated or not. This was the main concern, because the bridegroom has to know the value of the ring when he puts it on the finger of the bride. He has to know. The rabbi can ask him how much you paid for it and whether we can check it or not. If it's decorated, then the value changes. So that's why it's really shocking to have so many Ashkenazi wedding rings that are so beautifully decorated. And there are also many theories about this. For example, that they were not purchased by the bridegroom for good, but they were just loaned for the evening of the wedding or the day of the wedding at a fixed price. And then he would give it back to the community and they would use it for another wedding. This is one of the solutions that Rabbi Daniel Sperber offered. And because this was the concern of the rabbis over the centuries, not the other issues like which finger and so on.
Thank you. And some of the symbols that you find in the decorations, are they very specific to certain regions? Like you'd only find symbols in Egypt, in Egyptian ketubot that you won't find in Italian ketubot, besides the scene of the marriages?
Definitely. Not only that, but even more than that. As you'll see next week, I'll show you one country, Italy, and two towns, Venice and Rome, totally different ketubot. Different illustrations, different ideas, different agenda, you can say. And the illustrations convey, in my opinion, the situation of life of Venetian Jews in the ghetto as contrasted to those of the Jews of Rome that were under the Pope and suffered much more and so on. And still both ketubot are amazing, I mean, in both traditions. But definitely I can, when I see from, let's say, 100 meters a ketubah, Italian one, I can tell you immediately from which town it is without reading one word. Because there is certain style to Florence, to Mantua, to Livorno, to Ferrara. All these towns have their own style. Because art was very local in the past, so they did not have internet and so on like we have today. So artists really, and in folk art, artists don't try to innovate something new. They imitate what was before them. So that's how it happened.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we don't have time for more questions, but this is a 4-part series, so you will be able to ask more questions next time. Thank you so much, Professor Sabar, for today.
My pleasure.